Find a comfortable position. Let your body rest fully. Allow your breathing to settle into an even rhythm, not deep, not heavy, just steady. There is no altitude to reach tonight. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called The Quiet Life of a Cloud Shepherd. Morning has already begun by the time you reach the ridge. The light is pale and wide, spreading evenly across rolling hills without sharp contrast. Grass bends under a narrow current of wind, each blade tipped with dew that flashes briefly before disappearing back into matte green. The earth beneath your boots feels firm and familiar, slightly cool, slightly dry. It carries the memory of many seasons, yet this morning rests quietly, marked only by a single path curving along the height of the land. You follow it without thinking. The path is not carved or fenced. It exists because it has been walked, not by many, just by one at a time. Today, that one is you. The staff rests easily in your right hand. Long, wooden, balanced. Its surface worn smooth not by decoration, but by use. Some of those impressions are yours, some are not. No one spoke formally when it was handed to you. No instruction was written down. You were brought to this ridge many mornings before you carried it yourself. You walked beside someone older and watched how they paused, how they tilted their head when wind shifted, how they stood without hurry. Eventually, the staff was placed into your palm, and the walking continued. The sky above stretches wide and open. Clouds drift in slow formations across blue, not thick enough to threaten rain, not thin enough to vanish. Loose bodies of white and soft gray, shaped by upper currents invisible from below. You stop near the crest of the ridge. Inhale. The air carries faint traces of dry grass and distant stone warmed by early light. Exhale. Your shoulders remain loose. From here, the valley opens outward in layered greens. Fields arranged without urgency. Hedgerows dividing space gently. A thin river reflecting sky in broken fragments as it bends between low slopes. The clouds above the valley are gathering slightly more densely than they were yesterday. Not heavily, just closer together. You shift your stance. The staff's base touches the ground beside your boot. No sharp sound, just contact. The wind moves across your sleeve and along the side of your neck, light and exploratory. You turn your face toward it and let it move past. Reading wind is not something explained, it is felt. You lift the staff a few inches and angle it toward the slow current moving above the valley floor. The gesture is minimal. No arc, no command, just alignment. The nearest strand of cloud thins slightly along its edge. A narrow opening forms where two shapes had been drifting toward one another. Light slips through that seam and falls across the fields below, widening gently without glare. You lower the staff. That is enough. Cloud shepherding is not correction. It is prevention of crowding. You walk again along the ridge. Boots press into dry soil. Small stones shift under your weight and settle again. The wind continues at the same narrow pace, neither increasing nor fading. A hawk circles at a distance, suspended within the same current you have just redirected. Its wings adjust subtly to the altered flow. It does not resist, it adapts. You pause at a shallow rise where the ridge curves slightly south. From here, you can see farther. The cloud layer toward the western horizon appears looser, more dispersed, shaped by higher altitude winds. Toward the east, a thin veil drifts across the upper slopes of the valley, softening light in gradual bands. You rest both hands lightly on the staff and stand without movement. Inhale. Breath moves evenly through chest and back. Exhale. The valley remains calm. The work here is quiet. There are no dramatic storms to battle, no towering formations demanding intervention. Most days require nothing more than presence. You learned that early. The one who walked before you rarely lifted the staff more than a handful of times each morning. Sometimes not at all. Clouds are not livestock. They do not wander off cliffs, they gather where wind carries them. Your task is simply to ensure that gathering remains gentle. The ridge dips slightly ahead, and you follow its contour. The grasses here grow shorter, shaped by persistent exposure to open air. Small wildflowers bend at the edge of stone outcroppings, their colors muted in early light. The sky continues its patient drift. Another narrow seam forms within the eastern vale, not because you forced it, but because you allowed current to widen where it already wished to. Sunlight spreads across the lower field. No one in the valley looks up and notices. They feel warmth shift across their shoulders. They adjust hats. They continue their mourning. That is enough. You stop again near a low stone marker half sunken into the ridge. It has no inscription. It marks nothing except that someone once paused here long enough to place it. You rest your hand briefly on its surface. Cool stone, dry. Inhale, the sky above moves without haste. Exhale, you remain still. The staff rests lightly against your palm, balanced, familiar. Not heavy, not ceremonial, just part of the morning. And the ridge continues forward, curving gently into open sky. The ridge narrows slightly as you move toward higher ground. Grass gives way to shorter growth here, shaped by steadier wind. Stone surfaces rise through the soil in low, rounded forms, worn smooth by years of exposure. Your boots find stable footing without effort. You have walked this line in fog, in high summer heat, in the dimness before autumn rain. This morning feels open and balanced. Above you, the cloud layer begins to show subtle variation. Lower strands move in a broad, slow current from west to east, easy to read, easy to guide. But higher still, thin streaks travel at a slightly sharper angle. They move more quickly, their edges finer, their shapes less rounded. You stop and lift your gaze. Inhale. The air feels the same at ground level, yet you know the higher current carries different intention. Exhale, your grip on the staff shifts slightly, not tightening, simply aligning your palm with its grain. The one who walked before you used to pause here longer than anywhere else along the ridge. You remember standing a few paces behind, watching how still they became. Not frozen, just attentive. It was never explained that the higher current requires less action and more patience. You learned by waiting. The wind brushes across your sleeve again, stronger at this elevation. It carries the faint scent of distant water from beyond the valley's edge. The clouds overhead respond to that higher movement, thinning along one margin, thickening along another. A cluster begins to form where upper and lower currents intersect. Nothing threatening, but if left to gather unchecked, the cluster will cast heavier shade across the eastern slope for most of the morning. You step slightly to your left, aligning yourself with the direction of the higher flow. The staff rises in your hand, not lifted high, not dramatic, just angled upward so that its length parallels the direction of the thinner stream above. You do not push. You do not draw lines in the air. You simply hold the alignment. The cluster hesitates, not visibly, but perceptibly. The upper streak stretches thinner at its leading edge. The lower body shifts by a fraction, widening rather than compressing. A narrow corridor of blue begins to open between them, subtle at first, then clearer. Light filters through that corridor and slides down toward the valley's far slope. You lower the staff. The wind continues. The higher current resumes its quiet travel, no longer intersecting as sharply with the lower drift. You remain still for a moment longer. Inhale. Breath expands gently through chest and back. Exhale. There is no sense of accomplishment, only continuation. The ridge rises another few feet before leveling into a broader shelf of stone. From here, you can see farther west, distant hills layered in pale green and muted gray. The sky stretches wider in that direction, clouds thinning almost to transparency near the horizon. You walk toward the shelf and rest the base of the staff against stone. The surface feels warmer here where light has settled longer. You sit briefly, not to rest from effort, but to observe without moving. Cloud shepherding is mostly observation. Intervention is rare. The morning has stabilized. Lower layers drift in even spacing. Higher streaks travel without convergence. Light reaches the valley floor in broad, gentle bands. You watch how shadow moves across the hedgerows below, not abruptly, but like water spreading slowly across a surface. Inhale. The wind carries upward currents that lift lightly against your jaw and collarbone. Exhale. Your posture remains easy. When you were younger, you believed there would be more to it, more gesture, more visible result. You expected the sky to respond clearly, perhaps dramatically. Instead, you learned that most corrections are invisible to anyone who is not looking for them. The staff rests lightly across your knees. Its wood bears faint discoloration near the midpoint where hands have held it year after year. You trace one of those worn lines with your thumb, not consciously, just through habit. The person who walked before you did the same. You remember seeing that gesture. It was not sentimental, just familiar. A thin layer of cloud drifts from the north now, higher and more diffuse. It does not threaten density. It only shifts tone slightly, cooling the light for a few minutes before moving on. You do nothing. Not every change requires touch. The wind settles into a steadier rhythm. A small flock of birds rises from the lower slope, riding the air in a loose formation before settling again among distant grasses. Their movement creates no disturbance in the sky above. The valley continues its morning. Somewhere below, doors open. A dog crosses a yard and pauses at the edge of a field. None of it reaches you in sound, only in faint implication. You stand again. The shelf narrows toward its far end, where the ridge curves gently back toward the east. From there, you will have a clearer view of the upper convergence line that tends to form closer to midday. But there is no hurry. You walk at the same unmeasured pace. Boot to earth, earth to boot. The staff moves with you, balanced easily in one hand. Above, the sky maintains its quiet drift. The corridor you opened earlier remains wide enough to allow warmth across the eastern slope. The higher current continues its angled passage without compressing lower forms. Everything holds. You pause once more near the curve of the ridge. Inhale, breath steady. Exhale. The morning has settled into its proper spacing, and you remain part of it, not directing, not commanding, simply walking the line that has always been walked, staff in hand, sky overhead, ensuring that clouds gather gently and part easily across the wide, patient land below. The sun climbs without announcing itself. There is no sudden change in temperature. Light settles more fully across the hills, shifting from pale to quietly warm. The dew that lingered in the early grass has disappeared. The ground beneath your boots feels drier now, more responsive under weight. You continue along the ridge. The path here flattens into a long, gradual stretch where sky feels wider than land. From this elevation, the valley below no longer draws the eye. The horizon becomes the dominant line, a soft curve of distant hills meeting an uninterrupted band of blue. Clouds drift steadily across that band. The spacing remains gentle, but the increase in warmth below begins to alter their shape. Lower formations rise slightly as heated air from the valley lifts upward in broad currents. Edges that were rounded earlier begin to swell. You slow your pace. Inhale. Air carries a faint warmth now, subtle but present. Exhale. The staff rests diagonally across your palm. Mid-morning requires a different kind of attention, not correction, anticipation. You were shown this part carefully. The one before you would stop here along the long, flat stretch and say nothing. You remember standing beside them, wondering what you were meant to see. It took time. Eventually, you notice that clouds expand most quickly when warmth builds evenly across open land, not dramatically, but persistently. They do not need pushing apart. They need room to stretch without compressing into thickness. A low bank begins forming along the southern slope of the valley, subtle, nearly unremarkable. It does not darken the land. It only reduces brightness slightly, softening the fields in diffuse light. You angle your body toward that slope. The staff rises just a few inches, not lifted high, not signaled, simply aligned parallel with the lifting current rising from below. The movement is quiet, the effect quieter. The bank hesitates at its densest point and begins to lengthen instead of stacking. Its lower edge thins slightly, allowing light to slip beneath and spread across the valley floor. You lower the staff again. The adjustment holds. The higher current continues in its angled path. The lower formations drift eastward with slightly more space between them. You walk on. The ridge dips briefly before rising again into another open stretch. Grasses here are longer, bending more noticeably beneath the strengthened breeze. Their motion mirrors the cloud drift above, lateral, unhurried, cohesive. You notice a subtle thickening toward the western horizon now. Not local, distant. A slow accumulation that will not reach this valley for hours, if at all. You do not concern yourself with it. The work is local and immediate. What lies beyond these hills belongs to another ridge, another shepherd. That knowledge has always been understood. The sky is wide, but responsibility is not endless. Inhale, the warmth has increased by a degree. Exhale, your shoulders remain loose. A thin veil begins to trail from the higher current, long and feathered, stretching downward in faint threads. It does not threaten shade, but it alters tone. Light cools slightly beneath it. You walk toward a natural stone outcropping near the ridge's center and rest the base of the staff against it. From here, you can see how upper and lower layers interact across a broader span. Clouds move in layered conversation. Lower forms respond to ground heat, higher streaks to larger currents. Occasionally, they align too closely and compress. You tilt the staff gently, not upward this time, but slightly across the direction of the higher streak. The angle is minimal. The feathered veil widens and disperses. Threads loosen into thin transparency rather than tightening into shade. Sunlight regains warmth across the mid-valley. You lower the staff again. There is no applause in the sky, only continuation. The birds that had lifted earlier now travel in a wider arc, crossing the ridge and disappearing into distant fields. Their path curves naturally through the widened current you opened moments before. The day progresses. You walk further east. Boots press steady into soil. The wind strengthens slightly as elevation increases again. It does not gust, it maintains. You pause at a shallow indentation along the ridge where grass grows thicker. This place always feels slightly more sheltered, even at height. The wind curves differently here, bending along stone before rising again. You stand within that bend. Inhale, air moves differently against your sleeve. Exhale, the staff rests vertical beside you. You do not need to move it. Sometimes the most important work is recognizing when not to intervene. The southern bank you lengthened earlier now drifts as a long, gentle formation rather than a compact cluster. Its shade passes slowly across fields without lingering. The higher streaks remain thin. The western accumulation continues at a distance without advancing. Balance holds. You resume walking. The sun has climbed enough now that shadows beneath low stone walls shorten. The valley feels open and breathable. Mid-morning rarely requires large gesture, only consistency. The staff shifts lightly in your hand as you adjust grip for comfort. You are not fatigued. The movement is simply habitual, as natural as brushing hair from your forehead. The ridge curves again toward a broader overlook. You know this point well. From here, the entire valley appears in layered sections: lower fields, mid slopes, distant rise. The sky above them feels proportionally immense. Clouds drift in even spacing. Light remains balanced. The warmth below rises steadily but not aggressively. You stand and observe without lifting the staff. Inhale, breath wide. Exhale, everything holds. Mid morning has expanded into itself, and you remain part of that expansion, walking the long ridge beneath open sky, guiding only when gathering becomes too tight, allowing space where light requires it, preserving gentle balance as the day widens quietly across the land. The ridge stretches farther than it appears from below. What seems like a single crest unfolds into a series of gentle rises and shallow dips, each offering a slightly altered view of sky and valley. The walking is steady but never steep. The land does not demand exertion. It invites continuity. The sun has climbed high enough now that light falls more directly across the fields. The warmth rising from below strengthens the lower current, and you begin to see a subtle change in behavior. Clouds expand more readily. Their edges soften and lift upward rather than simply drifting sideways. Small towers form briefly within larger shapes before relaxing again. Nothing unstable, just growth. You walk without haste. Boot, earth, staff. The rhythm is familiar enough that your body moves without conscious instruction. Above the central valley, a loose grouping begins to thicken slightly. Not darkening, but layered more tightly than the rest of the field. You slow, inhale. The air feels warmer across your collarbone. Exhale. The staff shifts lightly in your hand. You step toward the outer edge of the ridge where wind travels cleanly upward from the valley floor. The grasses here lean more sharply, their movement tracing the invisible lift that feeds the expanding forms above. The one before you used to say nothing here, but they would stand exactly where you are standing now. You learn that placement matters, not because the staff is magical, but because alignment is. You angle the staff slightly downward this time, not toward the clouds themselves, but toward the rising current beneath them. The gesture is small, almost indistinguishable from rest. The lift beneath the thickening group widens instead of intensifying. The developing towers soften, stretching laterally rather than stacking vertically. A thin seam of blue reappears between two rounded forms. Light slips through in a wide band, touching the far slope and brightening stone walls in a subtle sweep. You lower the staff. The cluster relaxes. Its shade becomes dappled rather than sustained. That is enough. You continue along the ridge. Mid-morning carries a different tone now, not early quiet, not yet afternoon warmth. The day has settled into its central rhythm. Birdsong rises faintly from below, carried upward by the same currents you read above. The sound reaches you softened by distance. You walk past a line of low stone partially embedded in grass. It curves gently along the ridge, following an older boundary that no longer divides anything practical. Moss clings to its shaded side. Cloud shepherding is like this wall. Old, unannounced, still useful. You pause again as another subtle gathering forms farther east. This one is thinner, but more widespread, a broad veil stretching across nearly a third of the sky above the valley's edge. You do not approach it directly. Instead, you continue walking parallel to its drift. Sometimes the sky requires accompaniment more than adjustment. You allow the staff to remain low and horizontal as you walk, aligned loosely with the direction of travel. The veil responds gradually, not pulling apart, not dissolving, simply loosening. Threads within it separate by fractions, creating faint corridors where sunlight filters down in long shafts that widen as they descend. The effect below is gentle warmth moving across hedgerows in slow increments. No one in the valley knows why the light changed. They only feel it. You continue along the ridge. The wind steadies again, neither strengthening nor fading. The higher current remains angled and thin, no longer intersecting sharply with the lower lift. Balance holds. Inhale, breath moves easily. Exhale, your posture remains upright without effort. The staff rests comfortably in your palm. Its weight is familiar enough to feel like extension rather than tool. You remember the first season you carried it alone. You expected resistance. It never did, but it never obeyed either. It moved as it would have moved. You simply learned how to stand within its movement and nudge where necessary. Ahead, the ridge rises one final time before descending toward a long eastern slope. From that vantage, you can see nearly the entire morning field of cloud at once. You walk toward it. The ground here grows rockier. Small stones shift and settle under your boots. The grasses thin slightly, replaced by patches of low-growing plants adapted to wind exposure. At the crest, you stop. The sky spreads in full measure before you. Lower formations drift in even spacing. The earlier cluster remains relaxed. The veil you accompanied has widened into thin transparency. The western accumulation remains distant, unchanged. The day has found its spacing. You do not lift the staff. You rest both hands lightly upon it and stand. Inhale, warm air rises gently. Exhale, the valley breathes. There will be thicker gatherings later, not storms, just denser afternoon build as heat peaks. But that is hours away. For now, the long walk has done its quiet work. You begin descending the eastern slope of the ridge, not leaving your post, but continuing the circuit that has always defined the role. The staff moves easily beside you. Clouds drift above without urgency. Light spreads evenly across land, and you remain within the steady rhythm of balance, walking the height of the hills, adjusting where gathering grows too tight, widening where shade lingers too long, preserving gentle motion across a sky that prefers space. Excellent. Now we enter true late morning / near midday territory. More lift, slightly fuller formations, more frequent but still gentle guidance. No tension, no weather drama, just increased presence. By the time you reach the lower stretch of the eastern slope, the sun has settled into its full late morning strength. Not harsh, not glaring, but steady enough that the warmth rising from the valley becomes visible in effect. You can see it now in the way the lower clouds respond. Edges that once drifted laterally begin to rise more decisively. Rounded forms swell upward before smoothing out again. Small vertical growth appears within otherwise gentle bodies. Nothing unstable, but active. You slow your descent and turn slightly back toward the open valley. Inhale. The air carries warmth against your cheek. Exhale. The staff shifts lightly in your hand. This is the part of the day when attention sharpens. Morning required widening, now requires spacing. A broad formation near the valley's center thickens gradually, not dark, not threatening, but fuller than earlier. Its underside remains pale gray, diffusing light across fields in a cool band. You stop midway down the slope. The wind here lifts more directly from below, rising along the incline before dispersing. You plant the base of the staff into the ground beside you, not forcefully, simply placed. You angle the upper length toward the rising lift beneath the thickening cloud. The motion is small, almost indistinguishable from rest. The lift redistributes. Instead of feeding upward growth, it widens outward. The fuller center stretches laterally, thinning at its core. Light begins to filter through subtle openings, transforming what might have been extended shade into shifting brightness. The cloud does not dissolve, it relaxes. You lower the staff, that is enough. The warmth continues rising from the valley, but it now spreads across a broader surface rather than feeding a single point. You resume walking along the slope, neither rushing nor delaying. Boots move through grass now warmed by sun. The scent of dry stems and heated earth rises faintly with each step. A small insect lifts briefly from a blade and drifts sideways in the air before settling again. Above, the higher current remains steady, angled, and thin, barely interacting with the lower layer. The sky feels fuller now, more active, yet still calm. You reach the base of the eastern slope where the ridge flattens into a long, elevated plateau before dropping sharply into the next valley. From here, the sky appears wider again. You pause, inhale, breath steady, exhale. The broad formation you widened earlier now drifts in gentle continuity, its shade moving across fields without lingering. The smaller towers that had begun forming have softened entirely, absorbed into lateral drift. Another grouping begins developing along the far southern edge. This one is subtler, less dense, but more widespread. It threatens not thickness, but uniformity. If it spreads too evenly, light will dull rather than move. You adjust your grip on the staff and walk toward the southern edge of the plateau. The wind bends differently here, curving along the ridge before lifting in a soft arc. You align yourself with that curve. The staff lifts slightly, angled not toward the clouds themselves, but toward the arc of rising air beneath them. The adjustment is almost invisible. The widespread grouping begins to separate along faint internal lines. What was once a uniform veil breaks into elongated strands, leaving narrow passages of blue between them. Light regains texture. Fields below shift from flat tone to layered brightness again. You lower the staff. The grouping continues its drift, now more dynamic, less monolithic. This is the difference between cloud and cover. Cloud moves, cover lingers. Your work is to preserve movement. You continue walking along the plateau. The day grows warmer by degrees, but never uncomfortable at this height. The wind keeps everything in gentle circulation. Grasses lean and recover. Small shadows beneath scattered stones shorten further. You remember summers when the lift became stronger than this, when cloud forms built faster and required more frequent spacing. Those days demanded longer walks and more attentive presence. Today remains moderate, balanced. You pause near a small cluster of wildflowers growing at the edge of a stone break. Their colors are brighter now beneath widened light, yellow and pale violet catching sun in quiet flashes. Above, the sky maintains its layered motion. Inhale, air moves easily. Exhale, there is no urgency in your body. The generational rhythm holds here too, the one before you did not chase clouds. They walked steadily and allowed the sky to adjust around that steady presence. You do the same. A small upward plume begins forming near the center again, subtle vertical growth where warmth collects unevenly across the valley floor. You do not immediately intervene. You watch. Sometimes growth disperses on its own if given time. The plume stretches slightly higher. Its base thickens. You step 3 paces forward into cleaner wind and lift the staff just enough to redirect the lift beneath it. The plume spreads. Vertical impulse becomes horizontal extension. Light continues moving across the land without interruption. You lower the staff. The sky stabilizes once more. Midday approaches. The sun nears its highest point, though you do not measure it by angle. You feel it in the steadiness of warmth and the shortened shadows below. The plateau opens into a wide overlook facing eastward. You stand at its edge. Clouds drift in even spacing. Lower forms widen rather than stack. Higher streaks remain thin and angled. Light moves in broad, gentle bands across the valley. Nothing pressing, just warmth deepening into fullness. And you remain present within it, walking the long ridge, guiding where gathering becomes too tight, preserving motion where stillness would dull the day, keeping the sky open enough for light to breathe across the land. By the time the sun reaches its quiet height, the valley below feels fully awake. Light no longer stretches in long angled bands. It settles more directly across fields and stone, evenly distributed. The warmth rising from the land becomes constant, not surging, not uneven, but steady and sustained. At this hour, the clouds respond more quickly. Their forms grow rounder at the edges. Soft vertical swelling appears more frequently before smoothing out. The sky is not crowded, but it is active. You stand near the eastern overlook and watch the change unfold. Inhale, the air feels warm but clean. Exhale, your grip on the staff remains relaxed. Noon does not require force, it requires continuity. A broad formation near the valley's center begins thickening again, not darkening, but deepening in tone. Its underside diffuses sunlight more evenly, flattening brightness across a wide area. You step forward into open wind. The lift here rises directly from the central valley, strong but not aggressive. You angle the staff slightly across the rising current, not pushing, not parting, just altering the direction of lift by a fraction. The cloud responds in kind. Its densest portion elongates rather than stacking upward. A faint seam appears near its middle, widening gradually until a corridor of brightness slips through and spreads across the fields below. The adjustment holds. The warmth continues to rise, but now it distributes more broadly across neighboring formations rather than feeding a single dense point. You lower the staff. The sky continues. This is the most active hour of the day, yet the movement remains gentle. A second cluster begins forming farther north, smaller, but tighter. You do not hurry toward it. Instead, you walk parallel along the ridge, allowing your presence to align with the wind that feeds it. Boot, earth, staff. The rhythm remains unchanged. When you reach a position aligned with the northern lift, you raise the staff a few inches, angling it into the rising air beneath the forming cluster. The vertical impulse eases. The tightness loosens. The cluster spreads into a wide, soft body that drifts eastward without casting sustained shade. You lower the staff once more. The day holds. Noon light rests evenly across the hills. Stone walls glow pale. Grasses shimmer faintly in the warm air. The river in the valley reflects broken pieces of sky in muted silver. You walk along the ridge's upper line, not seeking trouble, simply reading. Higher streaks remain thin and angled, unaffected by the lower lift. Their passage is steady and detached from ground warmth. Lower forms remain rounded and soft. The spacing is correct. You pause at a midpoint along the plateau. Inhale. The warmth touches your collarbone. Exhale. Your shoulders remain loose. You remember being told, not in words, but in example, that noon is never the time to dominate the sky. It is the time to prevent excess. Too much intervention fragments. Too little creates heaviness. Balance sits between. A wide veil begins forming near the southern boundary again, broader than before, but thinner. This one does not thicken, it dulls. If allowed to spread too evenly, the valley would lose its layered brightness and settle into flat tone. You step closer to the southern edge and allow the staff to rest horizontally at waist height as you walk. The wind curves along the ridge and lifts upward in a soft arc. You align with it. The veil begins to stretch. Internal gaps widen slightly. Threads of brightness descend in long vertical shafts, creating moving patterns across hedgerows and slopes below. You lower the staff. The veil continues its drift in gentle strands rather than uniform sheet. The noon plateau stabilizes. You stand still now, staff vertical beside you. The sky feels full but not crowded, active but not restless. This is the height of the day. Clouds respond readily at this hour, yet they do not resist. They move as they would have moved, only spaced more gently. You take a few slow steps along the ridge. The wind remains consistent. Birds circle lazily beneath the cloud layer, rising and descending in smooth arcs. Their flight paths follow the subtle adjustments you have made, though they never acknowledge it. No one below knows that corridors of light were widened. They simply feel the warmth shift. That is enough. Inhale, breath steady. Exhale, the valley breathes evenly. Another minor swelling begins near the center, but before it grows dense, you shift position slightly and allow the lift to widen naturally. Sometimes alignment alone prevents excess. The swelling relaxes without direct gesture. You remain present. Noon does not require constant action. It requires watchfulness without tension. The sun holds its height. Shadows are shortest now, tucked close to stone and root. The warmth feels stable rather than increasing. Clouds drift in layered formation, some rounded and soft, others thin and streaked, all moving in coordinated quiet. You walk toward the far eastern edge of the plateau, completing the wide arc that defines your circuit. Behind you, the formations you adjusted earlier continue their gentle travel, no longer compressing or flattening. Ahead, the sky remains open. The western accumulation you noticed earlier has not advanced. It remains distant, softened by time and distance. The noon plateau settles into balance. You stand at the ridge's edge once more. Inhale, warm air moves through chest and back. Exhale, your posture remains easy. This is the fullest the sky will feel today. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, simply complete. Cloud shepherding at noon is not about change. It is about maintaining the quiet structure of motion, ensuring that warmth feeds breadth instead of height, that shade moves rather than settles, that light continues to travel across the valley in wide, patient bands. And you remain within that structure, staff in hand, boots steady on stone and grass, walking the long height of land while the sky above drifts in balanced, unhurried fullness. The change does not arrive all at once. It begins as a subtle easing. The sun still holds high, but its edge has shifted just enough that the warmth no longer presses upward with the same steady insistence. The lift rising from the valley floor remains present, yet it carries less urgency. You feel it first through your boots. The ground beneath them is still warm, though the heat has settled deeper into the soil. It rises more slowly now, like breath extending instead of quickening. Inhale, the air remains bright. Exhale, the intensity softens by a fraction. Clouds that had grown rounded through noon begin to stretch at their edges. Their vertical swell eases. What once rose directly upward now lengthens sideways, drawing thin veils between neighboring forms. You remain near the eastern edge of the plateau, staff resting lightly in your palm, only to observe. A formation that earlier would have thickened now expands outward instead. Its center diffuses, widening into a soft, elongated body that casts moving shade rather than fixed shadow. This is the beginning of afternoon, not decline, just length. You walk along the ridge again, slower now. Boot, stone, grass, the rhythm remains. Birds that circled high during the strongest lift now glide in broader arcs. Their wings hold steady rather than beating frequently. They ride what remains of the warmth without climbing. The valley reflects this shift. The river's surface brightens in longer streaks. The sharp silver of noon becomes brushed metal, softer, more continuous. You pause midway along the ridge and let the staff rest against your shoulder. Your shoulders stay loose. A thin line of cloud begins forming along the western horizon, stretched, like pulled cotton between unseen fingers. You do not move toward it. At this hour, movement from you would create more disruption than ease. Instead, you adjust your stance. A slight turn, a minor alignment with the breeze that crosses the ridge from south to north. The lift disperses evenly across a wider field. The thin line widens without thickening. It becomes layered rather than stacked. Light passes between its folds. The change holds. Afternoon rarely asks for intervention. It asks for allowance. You walk again, tracing the long curve of land that marks your circuit. The plateau feels broader now, though it has not changed. Perhaps it is the angle of light, perhaps the slower wind. Stone walls that glowed sharply at noon now appear matte, their brightness gentled. Shadows begin to lengthen by the smallest measure. Still short, still close, but no longer at their tightest. A broad formation overhead thins at its underside. Where once it held compact warmth, it now releases it gradually. The internal density loosens into layered strands. Afternoon is not about shaping height, it is about guiding release. In the valley below, fields show variation again. Instead of even wash, patches of brightness drift across them in slow procession. Hedgerows alternate between shade and warmth. Nothing abrupt, just motion redistributing itself. You breathe in. The air carries faint dryness now, the warmth more settled than rising. You breathe out. Your pace remains unhurried. Clouds continue stretching. Rounded tops flatten slightly. Edges feather outward into fine threads that trail behind them like quiet banners. The sky appears wider because its forms occupy more horizontal space. You stop near a weathered stone marker at the ridge's midpoint. From here, the western accumulation you noticed earlier is visible again. It has softened. Distance and time have worked together. What once seemed poised for growth now appears dispersed into layered sheets. Observation confirms balance. The lift has not collapsed, it is simply redistributed. A pair of higher streaks cross above, thin and detached from ground warmth. Their motion remains constant, unaffected by the valley's easing thermals. Lower forms drift beneath them in quiet coordination, layer above layer. No collision, no compression. You shift your weight slightly and rest both hands over the top of the staff. Inhale. The warmth touches your forearms. Exhale. Your pulse remains steady. Afternoon settles gradually, not as a drop, but as a long extension of breath. The sky feels reflective now, still active, still bright, yet calmer in its internal pacing. You begin walking toward the southern boundary of the plateau, not because something demands it, but because your circuit continues. Each step lands with the same measured pressure. A faint vertical lift attempts to gather near the valley's center again, but without noon's strength, it cannot rise sharply. It spreads instead into a gentle, sloping body. You angle your staff a few degrees into the wind, not correcting, only widening. The lift relaxes further. The formation lengthens and drifts east. Light filters through its thinner sections, casting long, luminous stripes across fields. The valley exhales. You lower the staff. Afternoon holds. The sun's position shifts another subtle fraction. Shadows grow perceptibly longer now, tracing along fence lines and dipping into shallow hollows between slopes. The change remains quiet. You feel no urgency. Cloud shepherding in early afternoon is almost invisible work. Often it is nothing more than alignment. You stop once more at the ridge's eastern edge. Behind you, clouds you guided at noon have become extended forms, softened and dispersed. Ahead, the sky remains open enough to receive the slower hours. Inhale, the air carries steadiness. Exhale, the plateau rests beneath you, warm and balanced. The most active part of the day has passed, not ended, passed. What follows will be broader, quieter, more reflective in tone. Clouds will thin further, light will stretch, edges will soften, and you will remain here, staff in hand, boots steady, walking the long height of land, allowing the sky to widen into afternoon without ever feeling pushed. The shift becomes visible now, not in temperature, in angle. The sun leans westward by degrees, so small they would go unnoticed if you were not watching for them. Light that earlier fell from above now begins to arrive from the side. Shadows stretch. Stone walls cast longer lines across grass. Fence posts draw narrow silhouettes that reach farther downslope. The ridge itself develops contrast along its uneven edges. You turn toward the western side of the plateau. The rhythm remains steady. Clouds that lengthened earlier now begin to feather at their edges. What was once smooth becomes lightly frayed, thin filaments trailing behind broader forms. The sky does not thin yet, but it opens. Inhale, the warmth feels less vertical. Exhale, the air brushes past your cheek in a slower stream. A broad formation overhead continues its gradual dispersal. Its center no longer holds density. Light passes through in layered sheets, illuminating the valley in wide diagonal bands. You do not raise the staff. There is nothing to shape. Afternoon at this stage asks only for accompaniment. You walk toward the western overlook where the ridge dips slightly before rising again. From here, the valley appears deeper. The river reflects longer streaks of brightness, broken occasionally by drifting cloud shade. The western accumulation you noticed earlier has dissolved into stretched veils. What once held potential weight now drifts as quiet layers. You rest the staff against your shoulder. Inhale, the scent of warmed grass lingers faintly. Exhale, your posture remains easy. A thin vertical lift attempts once more near the southern fields, but it lacks the earlier strength to rise sharply. Instead, it forms a slanted body that leans with the wind. You step a half pace to align with the breeze crossing the ridge. No gesture, no lift of the staff, just alignment. The slanted body widens. Its edges feather outward, and the central density fades into brightness. The adjustment is complete before it fully formed. You continue walking. Light deepens slightly in tone, not darker, but warmer. Gold enters the edges of clouds, touching their lower curves with faint amber. The sky remains pale blue overhead, yet near the western horizon it softens. Birds that earlier circled high now descend to lower currents. Their wings catch slanted light as they glide, casting moving shadows over stone and grass. The valley feels reflective, not quiet, reflective, as though each surface now considers the angle of light rather than absorbing it directly. You reach the western ridge crest and pause. Below, fields display alternating bands of brightness and shade stretching longer than before. Hedgerows glow along one side and darken along the other. You place both hands over the top of the staff and let it stand upright before you. Inhale, the warmth rests along your forearms. Exhale, the wind feels broader now, less upward, more horizontal. Clouds respond accordingly. Rounded tops flatten further. Their bodies elongate eastward, trailing thin strands behind them. The sky's motion feels lateral rather than rising. This is the widening hour. The day no longer builds, it extends. The warmth does not disappear, it changes color. Where noon carried pale brightness and early afternoon held soft gold, the valley now settles into amber. You stand near the western overlook and watch light stretch across the valley floor in long, unbroken bands. Inhale. The air feels cooler against your skin. Exhale. The warmth remains beneath it. Clouds have thinned considerably. Lower forms that once drifted in rounded bodies now dissolve into faint fragments. What remains occupies higher elevation, slender strands angled westward, catching light along their undersides. They glow softly. Not bright, not dramatic, just warmed. You walk along the ridge again. The rhythm is unchanged, though the ground beneath feels firmer, less willing to release heat upward. A wide band of amber light crosses the central fields. Hedgerows catch it along their upper leaves, while their lower branches fall into soft shadow. The river reflects bronze now, broken by darker currents that pass beneath drifting strands above. You rest the staff lightly against your shoulder. There is almost nothing to guide. A faint veil forms high above the northern boundary, thin, nearly transparent. It drifts without intention of thickening. You lift the staff only slightly, tilting it into the breeze so the air widens. The veil separates into two pale ribbons. Light slips between them, descending in a longer, softer shaft across the river bend. You lower the staff. The sky continues without effort. Birds move lower still, settling into trees along the valley edge. Their flight arcs shorten, becoming direct rather than circular. Lift no longer carries them upward easily. The valley quiets further. Not silent, settled, you pause at the ridge's midpoint and look east. The eastern sky has cleared almost entirely. Only high streaks remain, thin and brushed, their edges glowing faintly against deepening blue. The western horizon grows richer. Inhale. The air feels cooler now, steady and smooth. Exhale. Your breath leaves in longer measure. Cloud shepherding at this hour is presence alone. This is the final balanced phase of the day. After this, warmth will concentrate nearer the horizon. Shadows will deepen, contrast will increase. But for now, light rests in equal measure across hill and hollow. You walk toward the eastern overlook. The rhythm remains unchanged. Shadows stretch decisively now, touching fence lines and crossing narrow paths. The edges of fields become more defined as light angles lower. A faint atmospheric softness appears far west, not cloud, not clear, a delicate layer that warms to deeper copper where it meets the horizon. You do not intervene. This shift belongs to descent, and descent cannot be widened into evenness. You stand at the eastern edge of the plateau and look back across the valley. The broadness established earlier remains. Space between cloud strands is generous. Blue deepens slightly overhead. Warmth continues to rest along slopes. Inhale, the air feels cooler against your cheeks. Exhale, your posture remains easy. You remember, not in words but in practice, that this is the last hour when balance feels fully shared. Soon, light will gather toward one side. Soon, shadows will lengthen into dominance. But not yet. A final minor thickening appears high above, faint and translucent. You raise the staff only slightly. The breeze widens. The thickening stretches into a pale ribbon no longer distinct. Light passes through uninterrupted. You lower the staff. There will be little more to do. The sky has entered its final, even warmth. Cloud shepherding now is quiet accompaniment, presence without shaping, observation without adjustment. You begin one more slow walk along the ridge's arc. The ground cools gradually beneath you. Grass tips feel cooler than soil beneath. Stone retains warmth longer, holding the day's stored heat. High strands continue westward. Their glow softens further. The valley's color deepens in tone, though still gentle. The river darkens slightly, reflecting more shadow than light. You pause at the western crest once more. This is the last fully even warmth. After this, light will lean decisively west. Contrast will sharpen. Copper will deepen. But here, for a brief stretch of time, everything rests in proportion. Clouds high and thin, valley calm and expansive, air level and steady. You remain here, staff in hand, boots firm against stone and grass, accompanying the sky through its final balanced phase before descent truly begins. Nothing strains, nothing gathers, nothing resists, even warmth holds, and then slowly it prepares to yield. Ahead, the western edge gathers itself, not darker yet, but directional. The turn is visible now, not in speed, in direction. Light no longer spreads evenly across the valley. It gathers toward the west, concentrating along the horizon where the sun lowers with quiet certainty. Copper begins to enter the gold. Shadows lengthen into definition. You stand along the western ridge and feel the cooling more clearly against your skin. Inhale, the air carries calm clarity. Exhale, Warmth lingers low along the ground, but no longer rises. The sun approaches the line of distant hills, though it remains fully above them. Its angle sharpens. Light falls in long, slanting bands that divide fields into luminous and shaded halves. Cloud strands overhead respond immediately. Their undersides glow deeper, amber edging toward copper, while their upper surfaces fade into cooler blue. The contrast increases gently. You begin walking. Your shadow extends ahead of you now, long and unmistakable. The staff casts a slender line across uneven ground, joining the stretched silhouettes of fence posts and stone walls below. The valley changes tone. Where earlier warmth was shared evenly, now it concentrates in select surfaces. The upper slope of a hill, the face of a stone wall, the river's western bank. Lower ground cools first. Hollows darken softly. A faint veil drifts high above the northern boundary, catching copper light along its lower edge. It thickens slightly where cooler air meets lingering warmth. You raise the staff just a fraction, angling it into the horizontal breeze. The veil elongates rather than gathering. Its center opens, allowing light to spill through in narrow, glowing passages. You lower the staff. Descent continues. Birds move minimally now. Occasional wings cross the valley directly, seeking branches before deeper cooling arrives. Most have settled. The air feels smoother, more deliberate. You pause near the ridge's midpoint and look east. The eastern sky deepens in blue, free of density. Only the highest strands remain, pale and thinning. Contrast between east and west becomes more pronounced. Inhale, the coolness touches your collarbone. Exhale, your breath leaves warmer than the air around it. This is the hour when guidance becomes restraint. Intervention would create imbalance. Descent is natural. A small cluster attempts to hold shape above the southern fields, but without lift it cannot rise. It spreads laterally and thins. You shift your stance slightly, not shaping, only allowing space. The cluster dissolves into faint ribbons that glow briefly before fading into the layered sky. You walk toward the western crest. Copper deepens along the horizon. The sun's lower edge nears the distant hills. Light sharpens across grass blades and stone edges, highlighting texture that earlier lay flat under even warmth. Shadows grow longer still, crossing paths and slopes in clean lines. The river darkens in its bends, reflecting less direct light and more of the sky's deepening tone. Cooling becomes perceptible along your hands. The warmth now feels grounded rather than ambient. Cloud shepherding in this phase is nearly complete. You stand at the western overlook and rest both hands atop the staff. Even warmth has yielded to direction. High strands drift slowly westward, glowing briefly before entering the darker band near the horizon. Lower sky opens further as remaining fragments dissolve. The valley quiets in motion and color. Fields that glowed amber now transition into muted gold and soft shadow. Hedgerows darken at their bases. Hills beyond the river soften into layered silhouettes. You remain still. This is not the hour to widen or thin. It is the hour to witness. The sun lowers another careful degree. Copper becomes richer. Light pools along the western slopes while eastern ridges fall into cool shade. You take a final, slow walk along the ridge's arc. Your shadow stretches nearly twice your height now, moving ahead of you as though leading. The staff silhouette lengthens and narrows across stone. Cooling continues, air settles. Cloud strands above fade at their upper edges, their copper undersides gradually losing intensity as the sun nears the horizon. You return to the ridge's midpoint and stop. Inhale. The sky holds one final band of full copper. Exhale. The valley rests in divided light, and you remain here, staff steady in your hand, boots firm on stone and grass, accompanying the sky through its first true steps toward evening. allowing descent to unfold without resistance, without urgency, simply following the long arc of land as the day leans into its quieter half. The moment arrives quietly. The sun reaches the distant hills. Its lower edge meets the horizon not with drama, but with contact, a steady resting of light against land. Copper deepens, contrast strengthens. You stand at the western crest and watch the contact hold. Inhale, the air feels cooler across your face. Exhale, warmth remains low along stone and soil, but it no longer surrounds you. The sky separates into layers. Near the horizon, copper and bronze gather densely. Above that, a softer band of amber fades into pale gold. Higher still, the blue deepens, cool and widening. Cloud strands pass through each layer differently. Those nearest the horizon glow intensely along their lower edges, briefly ignited before drifting into shadow. Higher strands lose warmth sooner, turning faint and silvered against deepening sky. You begin walking. Your shadow stretches far ahead now, elongated and distinct. The staff casts a narrow line that trembles slightly across uneven ground. The sun lowers further, half visible above the hills. Light sharpens along textures, the rough grain of fence posts, the edges of stone walls, the blades of tall grass. Each catches copper briefly before slipping into shade. A thin veil drifts across the northern sky, intersecting the layered bands. You lift the staff just enough to widen the passing air. The veil elongates, spreading thinner across the stratified light, its densest portion parts, allowing the copper band beneath to remain visible. Cooling becomes unmistakable now. The air touches your hands with clarity. Inhale, the breath feels crisp. Exhale, warmth leaves more quickly. Birdsong diminishes almost entirely. Occasional wing beats cross the valley directly toward treeline. Most motion has settled. The river reflects the horizon's copper glow in a narrow ribbon. Beyond it, eastern slopes darken into layered silhouettes, their edges softened by distance. The sun lowers again. Now only a curved arc remains above the hills. The sky's layering intensifies. Copper near the horizon, amber above, blue deepening higher still. Cloud shepherding at this hour is stillness. Too much movement would fracture the layering. Too little is unnecessary. Balance is already held by descent itself. You walk toward the ridge's midpoint. A final thin strand crosses the sun's upper edge. For a brief moment, it glows bright copper, then fades as the sun sinks further. You do not intervene. This transition belongs to gravity and rotation. You stand once more at the western overlook. Inhale. Cooling rests clearly against your skin. Exhale. The valley divides fully now, western slopes illuminated, eastern slopes subdued. The sun becomes a narrow crescent above the hills. Copper intensifies briefly, then softens at its edges. High strands above lose color first, turning pale against the growing blue. Lower air remains warm but contained near ground. The final arc of the sun slips behind the horizon. Contact ends. Light remains. Copper lingers along the hills, diffused and radiant, though the sun itself is no longer visible. You remain still. Inhale, the sky holds layered color. Exhale, cooling continues steadily. The valley transitions from illuminated surface to reflective tone. Fields no longer glow directly, they carry afterlight. Cloud strands drift westward into fading warmth, their undersides dimming gradually. The stratified sky remains, copper near the horizon, amber above, blue deepening overhead, but the brightest intensity has passed. You take a slow final walk along the ridge. Your shadow softens now, losing sharp edges as direct light fades. The staff silhouette shortens slightly, blending into the broader shade. You stop at the ridge's edge one last time. Inhale, the air is cool and even. Exhale. The valley rests beneath layered evening light. Copper at the horizon line fades into softer amber. Blue deepens further above. Cloud strands become faint architecture against the darkening sky. This is the threshold. The sun has crossed. Descent becomes afterglow, and you remain here, staff steady, boots firm against cooling stone and grass, accompanying the sky through its final luminous band before twilight settles more fully across the valley. The sun is gone, not abruptly, completely. Its arc has slipped behind the distant hills, yet its presence lingers in the sky above them. Copper softens, amber thins. A quieter color begins to rise. You stand at the western overlook and watch the horizon hold its remaining warmth. The brightest band now rests just above the hills, no longer radiant but diffused. Inhale. The air feels distinctly cooler. Exhale. Warmth no longer surrounds you. It remains only in stone and soil. The stratified sky begins to reorganize itself. The lowest band shifts from copper to rose, faint at first, then deepening slightly as it spreads upward. Above it, amber dissolves into a pale wash that transitions gently into mauve and then into deepening blue. Cloud strands respond differently now. Those nearest the horizon glow briefly in rose light before dimming. Their undersides, once copper, turn muted pink, then soften further toward gray. Higher strands lose color first. They become silhouettes against deepening sky. You walk again. Your shadow has softened almost entirely. Without direct sunlight, it blends into broader shade, indistinct. The river reflects the afterglow in a narrow band, rose at its center, fading into darker bronze toward its edges. Fields that once held copper now carry a muted warmth, as though remembering light rather than receiving it. The air cools steadily, not sharply. Gradually, you rest the staff lightly in your hand. There is no shaping to do. Afterglow governs itself. A thin veil drifts high above the northern boundary, nearly transparent. It catches the last rose light along its lower edge, glowing briefly before fading. You lift the staff slightly, not to widen, not to thin, only to remain aligned with the breeze. The veil stretches further and disperses into faint strands. Light passes through one final time. You lower the staff. The adjustment is nearly invisible. You walk toward the ridge's midpoint. Cooling touches your hands more clearly now. The warmth in the soil recedes downward. Grass tips feel cool against your boots. The western horizon continues to change. Rose deepens toward a softer magenta at its lowest band. Above it, mauve spreads gently, blending into indigo at the upper sky. Cloud architecture thins further. What remains appears as delicate tracery, lines rather than bodies. Bird movement has nearly ceased. Occasional wingbeats cross low and quiet, heading toward final perches. Sound carries differently now, thinner in cooler air. You pause and breathe. Inhale. The air enters clean and cool. Exhale. Your breath feels warmer than the evening around it. The valley grows reflective, not dark. Reflective, fields lose individual brightness and become surfaces of tone. The river shifts from bronze to a muted ribbon of shadowed rose. A final strand crosses the western afterglow and glows faintly before dissolving. You do not intervene. Afterglow is not guided. It fades in layers. You resume walking along the ridge's arc. The ground beneath you cools in stages. Stone retains warmth longer than soil. Soil holds warmth longer than grass. The sky continues its upward shift in color. Rose thins, mauve expands, blue deepens. A faint silver begins to appear at the highest edge where day gives way to early twilight. Cloud strands overhead lose all warmth now, becoming soft silhouettes against the layered sky. You stand at the eastern overlook and turn back toward the west. The horizon line remains luminous, though no longer bright. The glow spreads more horizontally than vertically now, thinning across distance. Inhale, Cool air brushes your collarbone. Exhale, your shoulders remain easy. The last even warmth has yielded fully to cooling. Afterglow carries memory of light rather than its heat. The valley quiets further. Hollows darken. Ridges hold faint illumination along their upper lines. The river reflects dim rose in one final band before shifting toward deeper tone. You take a final slow walk toward the western crest. Your movement remains measured, though the landscape now feels slower than you. Cloud shepherding at this hour is complete, only witnessing. Rose fades gradually toward pale lavender. Mauve deepens. Blue above turns richer, approaching indigo. The first faint suggestion of early evening appears at the highest point of sky, not stars yet, but depth. You stop at the ridge's edge. Inhale, the air feels fully cool now. Exhale, the warmth has retreated into the ground. The afterglow holds for a final stretch, a horizontal band of muted rose above the hills, thinning minute by minute. Cloud strands drift through it silently. Their edges blur. Their forms dissolve into atmosphere. The valley rests beneath layered color. No compression. No movement that requires guidance. Only descent through tone. You remain here, staff resting lightly in your hand, boots steady on cooling stone and grass, accompanying the sky through its final afterglow as rose fades into mauve, mauve into blue, and blue into the quiet depth of early evening. The day has crossed. The sky prepares for twilight, and you stand within its widening stillness. The rose fades, not suddenly, gradually. The band above the western hills thins until its color becomes suggestion rather than presence. Mauve settles where amber once held. Indigo gathers above it, smooth and continuous. Twilight does not arrive with force, it replaces. You stand at the ridge's edge and feel the difference not in sight first, but in sound. Inhale. The air is cooler now, fully settled. Exhale. The valley answers with quiet. Fields that once reflected light now absorb it. Their surfaces no longer glow. They hold tone, deep, even, unbroken. The river becomes a darker ribbon, reflecting only the faintest trace of upper sky. Cloud strands overhead dissolve into silhouette. What earlier caught copper and rose now appears as faint architecture against indigo. Their edges blur. Their density softens into atmosphere. Your steps sound slightly clearer in cooler air. Stone retains the last stored warmth. Grass is cool at the surface. The horizon no longer carries color strong enough to define itself. Mauve blends upward into blue without clear division. The layering remains, but it softens. A faint star appears high in the eastern sky. Not bright, steady. It does not flash, it holds. You do not look for it directly. You simply notice its steadiness. Cloud shepherding has ended for the day. The sky regulates itself now through absence of lift, absence of heat. You walk toward the ridge's midpoint. Shadows no longer stretch, they merge. Edges that once defined hills and fence lines now blend into single surfaces of tone. Depth becomes gradient rather than contrast. Inhale. Cool air moves evenly through chest and shoulders. Exhale. Your breath feels visible in the quiet, though it is not. The western horizon holds the faintest residual warmth, a low band of dim bronze fading minute by minute. Above it, indigo deepens. The first star brightens slightly as the sky darkens around it. Bird movement has ceased entirely. The valley rests. You pause and rest both hands atop the staff. The air no longer moves with direction. It settles. High above, the last cloud strand drifts through deeper blue and becomes nearly indistinguishable from it. Twilight simplifies the sky. Where earlier hours required attention to proportion and balance, this hour requires only presence. A second faint star appears farther north. You do not raise the staff. There is no widening to offer, no thinning to correct. The work of lift and shade is complete. Your movement is the only clear motion left at this height. Below, the river darkens further, reflecting a thin silver suggestion near its center where upper sky remains lighter. Hills across the valley become layered silhouettes. Foreground dark, midground softer. Distance nearly merged with sky. The indigo overhead deepens toward night. Mauve fades almost entirely now, leaving only cool gradient above the horizon. You stop at the western overlook. Inhale. The air feels calm and clean. Exhale. Warmth has withdrawn fully from the air, leaving only the memory of it in stone. The first star remains steady. Another appears near it, not clustered, spaced. Twilight widens upward rather than outward. You remain here, staff resting lightly in your palm. Cloud forms that once required careful shaping are now indistinct. The sky is no longer architectural. It is expansive, even unbroken. You take a slow walk toward the eastern edge one final time. The ridge feels quieter beneath you, as if absorbing the cooling. The eastern sky deepens further, revealing another faint point of light, not sharp, simply present. The valley floor is mostly shadow now, no visible contrast, no distinct field lines, only layers of tone. You pause at the ridge's edge. Inhale. The coolness rests fully against your skin. Exhale. The day has closed. Twilight holds. The horizon's final warmth fades into indigo. Stars emerge one by one, not rapidly, not dramatically, just steadily. The sky that required guiding earlier now requires nothing at all. You remain staff steady, boots firm on cooling stone and grass, accompanying the valley into its first true quiet. No tension, no urgency, just widening stillness. The work of day is complete. The night will arrive gently, and you stand within the first calm breath of it. Twilight does not hold its first shape for long. Indigo deepens by degrees. What was layered color becomes unified tone. The horizon cools fully now. No trace of copper remains. No rose, no amber. Only a smooth gradient from softened navy at the hills to darker blue overhead. You stand at the ridge's midpoint and allow your eyes to adjust. Inhale, the air is clean and cool. Exhale. Warmth has fully withdrawn from the atmosphere. The valley below is nearly dark, not erased, present in silhouette. Fields that once glowed are now quiet plains of tone. Hedgerows form faint boundaries only where they meet the sky. The river becomes a subtle line, darker than its banks, reflecting a narrow band of remaining light overhead. More stars appear, not suddenly. Gradually, first one near the eastern rise, then another farther north, then a third higher still. They do not flash into existence. They reveal themselves as brightness gathers contrast. Your steps are softer now, not in sound, but in perception. Without angled light, the ridge feels smoother beneath you. Edges blur into even shade. Cloud strands that once traced the sky have dissolved completely. If any remain, they are indistinguishable from the darkening air. The sky is no longer architectural. It is open, wide, unbroken. You reach the western overlook. The hills across the valley form layered silhouettes, nearest ridge darker, distant hills faintly lighter against the deepening sky. Their outlines soften as indigo settles fully. Inhale, cool air enters evenly. Exhale, your breath moves quietly into night. A fourth star appears near the zenith, steady and pale. The first star brightens slightly as contrast increases. A small cluster begins to emerge faintly above the northern boundary. The air has stilled almost completely now. No directional wind, no lift, no crossing currents, only quiet settlement. You rest both hands atop the staff. There is no shaping at night. Cloud shepherding belongs to light and lift. Night belongs to stillness. You walk toward the southern edge of the ridge. Boot, grass, stone. The ground beneath your boots has cooled fully at the surface. Stone retains a faint memory of warmth, but it no longer radiates. The valley floor merges into continuous shadow. Only the river reflects the sky, a darker ribbon carrying faint starlight where it bends. The indigo overhead deepens further, approaching true night but not yet fully black. The gradient remains visible, a slightly lighter band near the horizon, darker overhead. Stars multiply slowly, not densely, measured, spaced, each one steady. You pause and look east. The eastern sky, once the brightest, now carries the clearest stars. The first faint constellation begins to suggest its shape, though you do not name it. Naming is unnecessary. Presence is enough. Inhale. The air feels stable and grounded. Exhale. Your shoulders remain loose. The ridge beneath you feels secure, safe. Even night does not rush here. It arrives layer by layer. The last trace of twilight fades entirely. Indigo becomes deeper navy. The horizon no longer glows, it rests. You begin one final, slow walk along the ridge's arc. Your movement is measured, consistent with the rhythm of earlier hours, though the sky above has transformed completely. Stars now appear across a broader span, some brighter, most faint, all steady, no flicker, no urgency. The valley holds stillness fully now, no visible motion in fields, no wings crossing sky, no shifting light, only the quiet presence of land beneath night. You reach the ridge's midpoint and stop. Inhale, cool air settles gently into your chest. Exhale, the breath leaves slowly, evenly. The indigo has deepened into full night blue. The first hour of darkness has begun, and yet nothing feels abrupt. The transition has been continuous from lift to length, from warmth to cooling, from copper to rose, from mauve to indigo. Now only depth remains. You remain here, staff resting lightly in your hand, boot steady against stone and grass, accompanying the valley into its deepening night. The sky no longer requires guidance, it requires witnessing. Stars continue to reveal themselves gradually, widening across the dome overhead. The river carries faint reflection. The hills rest in silhouette. The air is cool, even, safe, and you stand within it, grounded, unhurried, fully present, as indigo settles into the calm architecture of night. Night is no longer arriving, it is here. Indigo has deepened into full, even blue-black. The gradient that once marked horizon from upper sky has softened into near uniform depth. Only a faint lightness remains far west, and even that thins by the minute. Stars now hold their places clearly, not scattered, placed, some brighter than others, most small and steady. No flicker, no urgency, just quiet points of constancy across the dome overhead. You stand at the ridge's edge and let your eyes rest within that depth. Inhale, the air is fully cool. Exhale, the breath leaves slow and even. The valley below has settled into complete silhouette. Fields no longer separate visually from hedgerows. Slopes blend into one continuous surface of shadow. Only the river distinguishes itself, a faintly reflective line catching starlight where its curve opens toward the sky. There is no wind now, no lift, no directional movement. Air rests close to the land. You begin walking once more. The rhythm remains the same as earlier hours, though the landscape no longer responds with shifting light. Your steps feel grounded, deliberate, measured against the stillness around you. The staff rests lightly in your hand. It is no longer a tool, it is presence. Cloud shepherding belongs to day. You walk toward the ridge's midpoint. Stars increase in number gradually as your eyes adjust. A small cluster becomes clearer above the northern boundary. A brighter point near the eastern rise steadies, no longer faint. The sky feels vast now, not because it has expanded, but because there is nothing interrupting it. No architecture, no layering, just depth. Inhale. Cool air moves evenly across your collarbone. Exhale, your shoulders remain loose. The stone beneath your boots has cooled fully. Grass holds quiet moisture at its tips. Soil carries the faint memory of the day's warmth deep below, but it does not rise. The valley is fully at rest. No visible motion, no crossing wings, no shifting shadows. The ridge itself becomes a silhouette against the star field when viewed from lower slopes. You stand upon that dark line, steady and grounded. You pause and rest both hands atop the staff. Night settles not by closing, but by widening. Stars continue to reveal themselves one by one, not appearing, simply becoming visible as darkness deepens. The river reflects faint silver where it bends toward open sky. Beyond that, it merges into shadow entirely. You resume walking along the ridge's familiar arc. The cadence is unchanged from dawn. That continuity matters. The day has turned fully, yet your rhythm remains steady. You reach the western crest once more. The horizon is now fully cool. No trace of rose or copper lingers. Hills form layered silhouettes against a slightly lighter band of sky, but even that difference narrows. Above, the stars hold steady. You breathe again. Inhale. The coolness feels complete. Exhale. The air remains still. There is no need to look for constellations. No need to map or measure. The sky is whole without naming. The staff remains vertical beside you. Boots firm on stone and grass. Presence anchored to land. This is the quiet settle, not dramatic, not ceremonial, simply complete. You begin one final, slow walk toward the eastern overlook. The ridge feels safe beneath you, familiar in darkness. Every rise and shallow dip known through repetition. Stars extend across the full dome now. Depth increases, yet nothing feels distant. The night does not press downward. It opens upward. The valley breathes in stillness. You stop at the ridge's edge. Inhale. Cool air fills the chest evenly. Exhale, the breath leaves without resistance. There is nothing left to adjust, nothing left to guide. Stars above, river below, hills in silhouette. Air cool and even, the work of day has closed. The sky rests in full night, and you stand within it, grounded, unhurried, fully at ease. Night no longer arrives, it remains. The sky has reached full depth now, not layered, not transitioning, simply present. The faint gradient that separated horizon from upper sky has dissolved into near uniform darkness. Only a slightly lighter band far west hints at where the sun once set, and even that softens minute by minute. Stars hold steady, not emerging, not multiplying, simply visible. You stand at the ridge's midpoint and allow your vision to widen without searching. Inhale, cool air enters evenly. Exhale, the breath leaves slow and measured. The valley below is fully at rest. What earlier appeared as layered fields and hedgerows now forms a continuous plane of shadow. The hills beyond the river blend into the sky's lower band, their outlines softened but still perceptible. The river remains the only moving presence, though its motion cannot be seen. It reflects faint starlight in one or two subtle curves, then disappears into darkness again. There is no wind now. Air does not press or pass. It settles. You begin walking. Boot, stone, grass. The rhythm remains unchanged from dawn. That continuity matters. The sky has transformed entirely, yet your cadence has not. The staff rests lightly in your hand. It no longer alters the sky. It anchors you to the ridge. Above, the stars appear clearer as your eyes adjust further. A small grouping near the northern sky sharpens slightly. A brighter point near the eastern rise holds steady without flicker. No cloud forms remain. If any drift at great height, they are indistinguishable from the dark. The sky is no longer architectural. It is expansive. You walk toward the western crest. Boot, stone, grass. The ridge feels secure beneath you, even without light. Familiar rises and shallow dips register through memory as much as sight. Inhale, the air feels cool and grounded. Exhale, your shoulders remain loose. The temperature difference between stone and grass has evened. Earlier, stone held warmth longer. Now both feel calm and settled. You pause at the western overlook. The horizon has blended fully with the hills. Only the faintest separation remains where the sky's darkness meets the land's silhouette. Stars stretch across the full dome overhead, some brighter, most faint, all steady. The valley's quiet is complete now, not the quiet of absence, but of settled presence. You rest both hands atop the staff. Breathing remains even. Inhale, cool air steady. Exhale, slow release. You resume walking along the ridge's long arc. Boot, stone, grass. Your steps feel smaller in the vastness of the sky, though your pace remains unchanged. The river's faint reflection shifts slightly as you move, catching a narrow band of stars before dissolving again into shadow. The hills beyond appear layered only because of distance. Their edges blur gently into the night blue above. Inhale, the coolness rests evenly along your forearms. Exhale, the breath moves without resistance. The sky deepens almost imperceptibly. The brighter stars grow slightly clearer as contrast increases. A faint scattering becomes more defined near the zenith. The sky is self-sustaining now. You stand within it, grounded against stone and grass, staff resting lightly in your palm. Night fully established does not feel empty. It feels held. The ridge beneath you remains solid. The valley below remains calm. The stars above remain steady. The air rests without direction. You breathe again. Inhale, cool and even. Exhale, slow and unhurried. The cycle from dawn to now has completed its arc, yet nothing feels finished in the sense of ending. It feels continuous. You begin one final, slow walk toward the eastern overlook. Boot, stone, grass, the ridge remains familiar even in darkness. Your movement remains measured. Above you, the star field extends wide and steady. No sudden brightness, no shooting arc, just constant light at immense distance. The valley rests fully. No birds, no visible current, no flicker of distant lamps. Only land and sky in calm proportion. You stop at the eastern edge and look upward once more. Inhale, the air cool and still. Exhale, breath steady. And you remain staff steady, boots grounded, posture easy, standing within a sky that no longer requires shaping, within a valley that no longer shifts, within a stillness that feels complete. You do not walk immediately. You remain where you are. Night does not require motion. It holds on its own. The ridge beneath you is steady, stone cool, grass settled, soil quiet. Above, the stars no longer feel distant. They feel placed deliberate points across a deep and even sky. Inhale. Cool air enters without resistance. Exhale. The breath leaves in measured length. There is no wind now, no lift, no passing current along the ridge. Air rests close to the land. You adjust your stance slightly, shifting weight from one foot to the other, not to correct anything, simply to remain comfortable. The staff rests lightly in your palm. It no longer alters space, it anchors presence. The valley below is indistinguishable in detail now. Fields and hedgerows have merged into one continuous surface of shadow. Only the river suggests itself faintly where it reflects a narrow scatter of starlight. Silhouette and sky meet without clear boundary. Inhale, the coolness feels complete. Exhale, shoulders soften. Night fully established does not deepen quickly. It holds steady for long stretches, almost unchanged. The sky's darkness feels consistent, uninterrupted. More stars become visible as your eyes settle further into it, not because the sky brightens, because perception adjusts. A faint cluster near the northern sky sharpens. A brighter star above the eastern ridge steadies into quiet prominence. No flicker, no rush, you remain still. This is the still watch, not vigilance, not alertness, just presence. You rest both hands atop the staff and let your gaze widen rather than focus. Inhale, breath even. Exhale, longer now. The ridge feels secure beneath you. Its line is familiar. Even without light, you sense its gentle rises and dips. There is no urgency left in the air, no shaping required, no balancing. The cycle has completed itself. You remember the noon plateau, the warmth rising steadily, clouds swelling and dispersing under careful alignment. That energy feels distant now, softened by layers of time. Night carries no upward motion, only depth. You shift your weight slightly again, boot against stone, grass brushing at the edge of your step. Nothing else moves. The valley remains completely at rest. Inhale. Cool air settles in your chest. Exhale. Breath leaves without sound. The sky overhead feels wide, but not overwhelming. Its darkness does not press downward. It opens upward. The stars space themselves naturally. A few brighter points anchor the dome. Fainter lights fill the gaps. You lower your hands from the top of the staff and let one hand rest loosely at your side. There is no need to grip anything tightly now. The ridge holds you in quiet stability. Far below, the river continues its unseen current, though only the faintest reflection suggests it. The hills beyond have become part of the horizon's dark line. You do not look for change. Night does not reward searching. It rewards settling. You take a slow step forward, boot, then another. Stone, then grass. The rhythm remains, but slower now, measured. You walk a short stretch along the ridge's arc and then stop again. Movement is no longer necessary. Inhale. The air feels cooler along your hands and wrists. Exhale. Warmth from the day is fully gone from the air. The sky appears steady and immense. The small cluster near the north sharpens further. A few more faint stars appear high overhead, though they do not alter the overall tone. The valley is safe in its darkness. There are no sharp contrasts left, no hard edges, only layered shadow. You rest both hands atop the staff once more. Breathing remains slow. Even, night is no longer an event, it is environment. You remain within it, not separate, not directing, simply present. Inhale, exhale. The ridge beneath your boots remains solid. The sky above remains open. The valley below remains at rest. And you stand between them, steady and grounded, breathing quietly within a night that requires nothing more from you. The ridge beneath you is steady and cool. Stone holds no warmth now. Grass rests motionless. The soil carries the day deep below its surface, but nothing rises from it. Above, the sky is complete, dark, wide, held. Stars remain steady across its depth, not multiplying now, simply present in quiet constancy. Inhale, cool air fills the chest slowly. Exhale, the breath leaves in a long, even stream. There is no wind, no crossing current, no lift. Air rests close to the land as if settled for the night. You loosen your grip on the staff slightly. It no longer anchors movement. It accompanies stillness. The valley below cannot be divided into fields or hedgerows anymore. It is one continuous surface of shadow. Only the river suggests itself faintly where it catches a thin thread of starlight in one narrow bend. The hills beyond form a soft, unbroken silhouette. Inhale, the air feels calm against your face. Exhale, your shoulders drop another fraction. Night at this depth does not change quickly. It holds. The sky above you feels less like space and more like depth, an openness that extends upward without edge. Stars remain unwavering. A brighter one in the east anchors the field. A faint cluster near the north softens slightly as your gaze relaxes. You do not search for patterns. You allow your vision to widen. Night does not demand attention. It receives it gently. The ridge feels secure beneath you. Even in darkness, its line is known through repetition. You have walked it in lift and length, in warmth and cooling. Now you stand within its quiet. Inhale. Cool air settles evenly. Exhale. Breath flows without interruption. The river continues its unseen movement below, but its sound does not reach you. Only its faint reflection hints at continuity. The The sky feels stable, not expanding, not shifting, simply present. You rest both hands lightly atop the staff and allow your posture to soften. There is no task remaining, no balance to maintain, no shaping to complete. The long breath of night carries everything into still proportion. Inhale, cool and steady. Exhale, even and unforced. Time feels slower here, not suspended, just unhurried. The valley below holds its darkness comfortably. There is no tension in shadow, no hidden sharpness, only quiet surfaces blending into one another. A faint star high overhead brightens slightly as your eyes adjust again. Then another near it becomes visible. The sky deepens without pressing downward. You remain steady between land and stars. Inhale, air cool and grounded. Exhale, breath long and smooth. The ridge's stone feels solid beneath your boots. Grass cool against your ankles, the staff vertical beside you unmoving. There is no need to look toward horizon now. Night surrounds equally on all sides. The breath continues. Inhale, exhale, slow, even. The valley is safe in its darkness. The sky is calm in its depth. You stand within the long, quiet breath of night, grounded, steady, unhurried, allowing stillness to hold its shape around you. And the breath continues. You remain where you are. There is no need to move again. The ridge is steady beneath you. The sky is steady above you. The valley rests between. Stars hold their positions across the sky, small, constant lights against deep night. You do not count them, you do not trace them. You allow them to remain as they are. The river below reflects faint silver in one narrow bend, then disappears into shadow again. The hills form a single, unbroken silhouette. Inhale, air cool and clean. Exhale, shoulders soft. The staff rests lightly in your hand, though it is no longer needed. Its presence is quiet now, like the ridge itself. Breathing becomes the clearest rhythm in the landscape. Inhale, exhale, slow, even. The stars remain. The darkness remains, the air remains calm. You shift your weight slightly. Boot steady against stone, grass unmoving, then still again. The valley holds its quiet fully now. No wing passes overhead, no ripple catches light sharply. Even the suggestion of movement feels distant. Inhale, cool air settles in your chest. Exhale, longer. The day's arc has completed itself. Dawn's lift, noon's balance. Afternoon's length, evening's glow, twilight's quiet, night's depth, now only stillness. You lower your gaze slightly, not away from the sky, but into softness. There is no need to focus sharply on any single point. The ridge feels familiar. Secure, even in darkness. Inhale, breath steady. Exhale. The coolness rests comfortably against your skin. There is nothing left to guide, nothing left to adjust, nothing left to hold in balance. The sky requires no shaping. The land requires no watching. You stand within a complete cycle. Then gently you allow stillness to become more comfortable than standing. Not leaving, not departing, just softening. Inhale, exhale. The breath grows slower. The night remains steady, stars constant. Air calm, the ridge beneath you solid and safe. The valley is fully at rest. The sky is fully open, you are fully grounded, and the quiet holds, breath by breath, unhurried, unchanged, complete. The sky continues as it always has. Its rhythm remains, you do not need to follow it. You are already within it. The night gathers, the quiet holds, and the rest will carry itself.